Hey there, today I'm doing a comparison of all the different types of gouache that I've already tried, but just as a little disclaimer, I don't know every single brand of gouache and I don't know everything about it. So here's just my experiences with those different brands. At first I made this kind of grid just to do some swatches on in my Canson XL Mixed Media sketchbook. It's not a perfect grid, so don't come at me for that. At first we're doing Arteza, and these ones are really good for the price that they are, in my opinion. I've been sent those for free, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but to be honest, I tend to be more strict with the things that I get for free because I don't really see that much value in them compared to when I buy them myself. Here you can see some of the older clips where I tried them for the first time. This video is still on my channel. It's just so fun to see older pieces and the videos of mine. Honestly, I can see how much I've improved if I see this, but here you can see what I did with those paints back then. The next ones are Holbein water-soluble gouache. There are gonna be two types of Holbein gouache in this video, but first we're gonna do the water-soluble ones. And they're pretty expensive, they're pretty high-end. You can see that the purple's a little bit streaky, the turquoise is much better, so it really depends on the colors, as it does with most gouache. It really depends on the colors. The next one is Winsor & Newton Designers Gouache. I love these. I honestly really love these. I think they're super smooth. They're a little bit harder to control when it comes to getting the right consistency, but they just lay down so smoothly. It's the easiest to get flat layers. I mean, look at that red and that yellow. With colors like these, it often doesn't happen that easily to get such a smooth layer. Here you can see a very old video where I tried those. I have to use this older footage because now I'm just using all kinds of gouache at once on my palette, so I can't really tell which one is which. But in these older clips, you can see how I used these specific brands. And yeah, this was probably my first gouache video on my channel, or one of the first ones. So this is pretty old as well. The next one are these Nerschau, however called, tempera colors, and I was told that they're the same formula as Lucas colors or Lucas Gouache Farben, however you want to say it. So they seem to be the same brand. They have about the same consistency. I can see the similarities, but I only have those two colors left. But I did a Lucas gouache review on my channel once, and I got those at a store called Müller, which is ideal if you live in Germany or Austria. You can get those offline, but I really hated those, to be honest. You need a lot of layers in order to get a flat layer. They're super streaky, so I was not happy with them. Here this took so many layers. It honestly depends on the style that you're going for, and I was pretty happy with the end result of that video, but I then later on gifted those colors to someone else because I'm not gonna use them anymore. The next ones are Himi gouache. A lot of people love those, and I got those, I borrowed those from my girlfriend's sister, so I just had them for a short period of time, and I just tested them for you all, and honestly, I don't think they're too bad. They have a very thick consistency though, which I think can be both easy or hard to work with, really depending on you. And if you tend to use too much paint, those are not for you because it's really hard to control. You can see here how much of a hard time I had blending those, just because I was using way too much color, because it's just so easy to use too much with these. I used them in one of my recent videos where I painted this cardigan scene, I used watercolors and this gouache, and I found that they're pretty opaque, but they have a super weird smell that I honestly can't explain. Then now I'm doing a little opacity test and using the lighter colors, ideally the white tone on top of the other colors, just to see how opaque they are. But it's not a complete comparison because I did add water to the mixtures and I might have added some more or less water, really depending on the kind of consistency the paint had before then. So it's not a perfect comparison. I found that they're all pretty opaque, to be honest. I didn't see any faults with any of those when it comes to the opacity. And so when it comes to that, none of them are really that bad. By the way, if you want to learn more about gouache, I have 3 Skillshare classes about gouache. One is a complete beginner's guide, and I only talk about water-soluble gouache in this one. Then another one is a specific landscape, and the newest addition to my gouache classes is one where we paint very stylized landscape illustrations. So if you're interested in learning more about gouache and specific tutorials that might be a little bit slower than the ones that I have here on YouTube, then go ahead and check out my Skillshare classes. As always, they will be linked in the description box down below, and you can get 2 months for free with my link. So as a recap for the Arteza colors, they're pretty cheap. You get a big range of colors. I think that they have a super nice consistency. They're very easily available online. You can also get them with Prime shipping and they should arrive pretty fast. I think that they're probably not light fast. When it comes to the light fastness, please do your own research because I don't know everything. I have not researched the specific pigments that are used, and it really depends on the colors and the pigment, but I guess for the price that Arteza colors are, they're probably not light fast. The opacity is okay, but not incredible. You might need more than 1 layer, but honestly, I haven't had that much of a hard time with them. The Holbein colors are premium quality. They're probably the most or one of the most high-end gouache paints that you can get, at least as far as I'm informed. They're probably pretty light fast, again, depending on the colors and pigments that were used. They have a pretty nice consistency. Then on the con side, they're very expensive. Sometimes they're hard to get online, and the opacity really depends on the color. Again, those are just my personal opinions. I have not used the Holbein water-soluble gouache as much, so I might do a specific video on the small set that I've got. Winsor & Newton Designer's Gouache, it has a really nice beginner set with an awesome range of colors. It's very easy to get flat layers and in my opinion is the least streaky of them all. It's rather opaque and light fast depending on the color. Again, do your own research please. They're in the mid-range price but not cheap. They have a nice consistency, but sometimes not. It really depends on the colors. Some of them are really a nice consistency, some are rather thick. I personally prefer the consistency to be just a little bit thinner because it's easier to control the paint. You don't have to add as much water, and if you add too much water you lose the opacity. So the only real con with them for me personally is that some of them have a rather thick consistency and you have to add in quite an amount of water, which then loses you some of the opacity. Then the Lucas colors, they're easy to get offline at Müller if you live in Germany or Austria, so you don't have to support Amazon or any other online platform if you rather want to support local stores and live in this area, or you can find them offline somewhere. That's a big pro because honestly, I think that's the only gouache that you can get in the city where I live. And they're also rather cheap. Con, they're not opaque at all. You might need several layers and they're very streaky. Honestly, I had such a hard time with them. I mean, I tried to get a very layered and illustrative style with them. So if you want to go more for a style that does not need flat layers, then you might be much happier with those colors. Then the Himi gouache, again, I didn't use those a lot. I just used them in the one piece and for the swatches here. But they're rather easy to use because they're already wet, so you don't have to add any water before you use them. They're rather cheap and they come in a palette. This might be a big pro for you because you don't have to think about where to store them, where to put them, on which palette to put them. Then the cons is that it smells rather strong, and honestly I don't know if they went moldy. On my last video a lot of people said that maybe they went bad, but I asked my girlfriend's sister if that smell is new or if it had been there before, and she said that they already smelled like that when she got them, so it's probably just the paints smelling very strong. And I personally don't like that at all. I think that they smell super weird. I like plastic, but also bad. I really don't like the smell of these, and if you're sensitive with this, that might be a con for you. The palette is rather big, which might not be a big deal to a lot of people, but for me, I can't fit it in the frame of my videos. I don't know where to put it because it's so big. For me personally, that's a con. And it has a thick consistency, which I personally don't really like because I have to water it down a lot in order to be able to control the paints easily. Now we're going to talk about acrylic gouache. I've tried two types of acrylic gouache. These ones are Holbein acrylic gouache, and then we also have Turner acrylic gouache. And both of those seem to be pretty popular, and I recently got this huge set of Holbein acrylic gouache, which is super expensive. I think I paid about 160 euros, which should be $200 or something along those lines. A lot of money. So they're expensive. Also the Turner gouache is expensive as well, but a little bit less expensive, which is why I would probably recommend the Turner gouache over the Holbein, just because it's much less expensive and easier to get depending on where you live. I think they come from Japan, so it really depends where you live. If you do live in Japan, it's probably super easy to get those. If you don't live there, it might be a little bit harder. Both of these brands tend to be out of stock a lot of the time, but they have such a nice quality, both of them. The Holbein ones are a little bit more opaque. I think they have a little bit of a thicker consistency compared to the Turner acrylic gouache, which again depends a little bit on what you want. If you tend to be super heavy-handed when it comes to paint, then you might want to go for a little thinner consistency. The Turner acrylic gouache, the pros are that it's waterproof, so that makes layering very easy. Acrylic gouache is a little bit more like acrylics. You can't really tell the difference of the appearance when you compare the end result to something where you used water-soluble gouache, so you get the same effect that you would with water-soluble gouache, but it is waterproof. So if you're doing a lot of layering and don't want to reactivate the previous layer, that's amazing. They're also very opaque. I really love the consistency, so that makes them much easier to use because you don't have to water them down as much, and they also claim to be light fast. The cons is that it's rather expensive and sometimes hard to get. They're very often out of stock. You can't put them in a palette to reactivate later, just like with acrylic paint. It's not like water-soluble gouache where you can use it like watercolors and always reactivate it and use a palette over and over again. With acrylic gouache, you have to be a little bit more conscious about that. You could use a keep wet palette for acrylics, but you really have to think about that and get the right palette for them. Then the recap for the Holbein acrylic gouache. Pro, again, it's waterproof, which makes layering very easy. Most opaque gouache I've ever used, so there's none that compares to that in my opinion. They're very light fast depending on the color and also have a lot of information about that. Con is that they're very expensive depending on where you live. So again, I paid a lot for that big set. You have to ship it over from Japan. Sometimes they're hard to get as well, very often out of stock. And you can't put it in a palette to reactivate later, just with the other acrylic gouache. Here you can see that the acrylic gouache did not reactivate unless it was still wet, so where it was already dry it did not reactivate. This was water-soluble gouache, this was acrylic gouache, so you really can't tell the difference from the pieces. This was acrylic gouache, this was water-soluble gouache, and acrylic gouache again, more acrylic gouache, and water-soluble gouache again. These were paint markers. This was water-soluble gouache on the right and acrylic gouache on the left side. So you can't really tell the difference when it comes to those visually. So this was the comparison of all the brands that I've used so far. Honestly, I only did this video because so many people kept asking me about this, but I don't know every single thing about gouache, so please don't come at me in the comments saying that I said anything wrong. Please don't be rude or anything. If you have additional information, please share it kindly in the comments for everyone so we can all learn more, and I might do an updated version of this video once I've learned even more about gouache.